High Truths on Drugs and Addiction, where national experts bring you facts and answer your questions. I am your host, Dr. Ronit Levy, an emergency and addiction doctor who has served at the White House and still practices on the front lines. Right here on High Truths, you will learn from experts, hear stories from the emergency department, and listen to people who have struggled from addiction. Friends, fentanyl is plaguing America. It has infected all illicit drugs, from cocaine to meth, counterfeit pills, and even marijuana. If you're around someone who may be using drugs, you should carry naloxone, the opioid reversal agent. Carrying naloxone for drugs is like carrying an EpiPen for allergies. If you need a prescription for naloxone, you should have one. No questions asked. That is why I am offering a free prescription to anyone who needs one. Come visit me on hightruths.com to learn more about the show, submit a question, or download a free prescription for naloxone. And if you like the show, do me a favor. Give us a 5-star review and subscribe. Your stars are very much appreciated and go a long way in supporting the program. Today's episode is sponsored by Families Against Fentanyl. FAF is an organization set on breaking the status quo of failed solutions and to get to the core of the supply chain of deadly fentanyl. Learn more about FAF by visiting familiesagainstfentanyl.org and sign their petition to declare illegal fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to be with you for another informative episode of High Truths. You're going to like this one. I'm your host, Dr. Ronit Levy. As you may know, I am jealous of infectious diseases. These days, it's all about COVID hotels and Shigella diarrhea hotels and all sorts of resources for infectious diseases. But what about drug overdoses? Fentanyl has taken more lives in ages 18 to 45 than COVID. The number of teens who died of fentanyl has tripled in the past 2 years. The number of Black teens affected and died of fentanyl has gone up 5-fold in the past 2 years. It's time to attack fentanyl overdoses with the same vigor and approaches as we do the coronavirus. That was my quote in a recent Fox News story. I told the reporter that it is heartbreaking to treat babies who overdosed or people who have no idea their pills or powder was contaminated with a deadly poisoning. Treating fentanyl overdoses is an attempt to bring someone back from the dead. As an emergency physician, I do my best, but sadly, we are not always successful. Fentanyl is preying on the vulnerable in our society. So what can I do about fentanyl as a doctor? There are a few things I can do. I'm very proud to have authored a California bill that will require all hospitals to include fentanyl in their drug screens. Most hospitals do not do this. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that does not show up in a hospital drug screen unless the lab buys a 75-cent reagent of fentanyl. Despite the fentanyl crisis, most hospitals do not do this. If passed, SB 864, Tyler's bill, would be very exciting for me as my very first piece of legislation to author. And if passed, it will also engage the medical community in solutions and treatments for patients. It won't end the fentanyl epidemic, but it will make some strides in the right direction. What else can I do as a doctor? I can administer naloxone to save people or provide free prescriptions as I do on my website. I can treat fentanyl addiction for those who want to be helped and get treatment. And I could work on prevention and encourage kids and young adults to protect their growing brain and not use marijuana or any addicting chemical before age 25. Marijuana and fentanyl are linked. You cannot talk about primary prevention for fentanyl without mentioning marijuana. Not everyone who uses marijuana will end up using fentanyl, but everyone who uses fentanyl at one point started with marijuana. So as a doctor, I can treat overdoses. I can work on treatment of addiction and work on prevention. That simply is not good enough. It does not stop the pipeline of drug use and poisonings. We have to do better. And that is why I support Families Against Fentanyl, the sponsor of this episode. FAF aims to have fentanyl declared a weapon of mass destruction. What is a weapon of mass destruction? Perhaps you're thinking a nuclear weapon or mustard gas. The definition of WMD, according to the Department of Defense, is a chemical weapon capable of causing mass casualties. In 2002, Russia used fentanyl analogs that they pumped into aerosolized fentanyl into the Dubrovka theater that was seized by terrorists. The terrorists and 120 hostages were killed, mostly from deadly fentanyl. This is a historical example of fentanyl being weaponized in a meeting the traditional definition of WMD. But today, as I speak, we're not being sprayed with aerosolized fentanyl, but we're still being poisoned. I ask you, is 64,000 fentanyl overdoses a year not a mass killing of Americans? Are we not experiencing mass casualties? We need to do something so drug dealers, cartels, and governments think 2, 3, 4 times before bringing in drugs that kill Americans. Fentanyl does meet, today, the definition of weapon of mass destruction. And with that, let's hear our question of the day.
Hi, my name is Larry Irwin, and I am in a unique position as I am currently practicing as a physician assistant in emergency medicine as well as a full-time police officer in Southern California. I see the devastation that drugs have on our community, both from the medical side in the emergency department and from the community side in terms of 911 calls, whether it be for violence, crime, or overdoses. I just want to say thank you, Dr. Lev. I've known Dr. Lev for approximately 20 years. Definitely doing good work bringing forth these tough discussions that are impacting our communities. My question for High Truths is it's quite obvious more needs to be done to combat the influx of drugs, especially ones laced with synthetic drugs such as fentanyl and carfentanil. These toxic and deadly drugs are being produced in huge quantities. What else is being done and what can be improved to combat the transport of these drugs into the United States? And what can we do to ensure we keep drug cartels out of our country?
Thank you, Larry, for your question. What a blessing you are to San Diego with a unique experience in medicine and law enforcement at the same time. How cool it is to work side by side with you one day in your white lab coat and see you the next day in your blue uniform bringing us a patient. I talk about a white and blue partnership, and you personify that in one wonderful individual. Larry, to answer your question, I have a special expert for you, someone from Mexico who is intimately knowledgeable with drug cartels, and I'm going to ask him your question at the end of the interview so we could learn more about the drug operations. Luis Chaparro is a freelance journalist working at the border between Texas and Mexico. He specializes in investigative journalism, breaking news, interviews, and digital storytelling. You can find Luis Chaparro's bio on the High Truth show notes. Luis Chaparro, welcome to High Truths.
Dr. Lev, it's a pleasure being here with you. I know I'm not your usual guest, but this should be interesting and fun.
It is. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I have to tell you, I've been watching some of your videos and felt really scared for you. Like, what is this guy doing? Like, he's risking his life.
Yeah.
So you're an investigative journalist. How did you, out of all the things to investigate, get into the subject of drug cartels?
Well, I grew up in Ciudad Juarez, right across El Paso, Texas. This was once Mexico's, I think it was the world's most dangerous city because we had an average of 13 murders a day. So that was crazy. That was when the whole cartels in Mexico were starting. And I started to learn about criminal organizations when I, at the same time, was in college, going through journalism university in Ciudad Juarez, in a private university in Ciudad Juarez. So my school was basically the streets of the once most dangerous city in the world. So that's where I learned journalism. That's where I got fascinated by criminal organizations, not in the bad way. Talking about, like, it's really interesting to me how they work, how are they so resilient, how they get to violent levels that every year gets worse and worse, and how they operate like multinational operations all over the world, and that's how I got into this, and I started like developing sources all over Mexico, all over the U.S., some of them also in Central America.
Did you run into drug crimes like that as a kid in Mexico?
Yes, I mean, I had an interesting upbringing. I was in a private school, one of the most expensive primary schools in Ciudad Juarez, and at the time, of course, I didn't know. But later, with time, I learned that at my same classroom, I was with El Señor de los Cielos, Amado Carrillo's sons, which the Lord of the Skies. It was one of the biggest drug traffickers ever existed in Latin America, or I guess in the world. And his son was with me back then. And then I remember growing up and people talking about him, talking about his family, and talking about this kid now being the new boss. So I was like, what? I was with him in primary school, And so to me, that blew my mind. That was crazy. So, I mean, that's how I started. And then the whole war began in Ciudad Juarez, and I began watching gruesome stuff that I don't think it's good to even repeat all the
You
gruesome
saw this
parts.
as a child?
I saw that as a teenager. So when I was in secondary school, in high school, I mean, I started like watching these happening around my city, around my neighborhood, and then I said, "What?" I was shocked. I was confused about what was going on in my city, and about why. So I started asking questions. I was always very curious, and I started reading at a very early age. I started reading literature when I was 5 years old, and so I've always been keen to reading. And I started like reading journalism, learning what was happening around my city, what was happening around my town and my country. And I decided I wanted to be a journalist. At the time in high school, I didn't even know what that meant, But I was like, I want to be a journalist. I want to go deep into what's going on in my city with this war,
Wow. And now you live, we're talking to you now from Mexico, right?
Yes, exactly. I live at the border. I have an apartment in El Paso, Texas, and I have a house in Ciudad Juarez. Well, I rent both, and I go back and forth, and also I go a lot to Mexico City. So I spend half of my year in El Paso, half of my year in Ciudad Juarez, and like sometimes a few days, a few weeks in Mexico City.
Right. And you recently visited Culiacan, right? If am I saying it right?
Yeah, Culiacan, exactly.
The capital of Sinaloa,
Yes.
home of El Chapo.
Mhm.
When I think about Sinaloa, I think drug kingpins and a scary place. Did you go there feeling scared as part of your job?
I go often to Culiacan since I have a bunch of sources down there, and I always want to have a feet on the ground and feeling what's going on with the Sinaloa cartel specifically, since it's being fragmented and the U.S. is upping the rewards for El Chapo's sons and for El Mayo and these other criminals. So I go very often to Culiacan, and Culiacan. So it's a beautiful city. It's an amazing city. It's a very clean and nice city in general. The people living in Culiacan, it's beautiful people. You have these great restaurants, great seafood. You have like a river walk, beautiful lives downtown. But at the same time, you have a bunch of drug traffickers around. You have maybe the most powerful drug cartel in the world, based in Culiacan, which is the Sinaloa cartel.
So are you like sitting in a restaurant, having your burrito and looking and seeing, oh, that guy is a drug trafficker? Do you identify him, or it's a hidden, unspoken thing?
Yeah, it used to be more open. It used to be more like you wouldn't see people with carrying guns or whatever, but you will see flashy cars. You will see Lamborghinis. You will see, Ferraris around town, and of course, who's driving a Ferrari in Mexico, especially in Sinaloa? Who's driving a Lambo? Who's driving the latest Urus SUV? It's crazy, and they were like super flashy. But since the arrest of El Chapo Guzman, things started like changing. They said, okay, El Chapo got caught because he wanted to make a film of himself. He was flashy. He was his people were very flashy. Now we're gonna do different operations. Now we're keeping it lay low. We're going to keep it quiet. And it's very hard to see right now Lambos or, Ferraris around town. You will see regular, I don't know, Nissan cars, just regular.
No bling, no big bling and
no blings, nothing like that. No armed people around town. But they definitely are there. They, I do have sources there, and they have eyes all over Culiacan. I stepped into downtown to make a few shots with my phone, of the cathedral, of like the downtown area. And then my contact sent me a photo of myself from behind with a message that said, "Is this the guy you were helping? He's right here downtown." And then I was at a plaza eating some shrimps, and and then it's like, now he's at the plaza. So they kept track of every step I was doing in Culiacan. And my contact, I have a long relationship with him, long time relationship. For 8 years, he's been my source, so we trust each other somewhat, somehow. You can never trust these people in full. But he started like sending me those text messages like, "Hey man, my people is tracking you, making sure you are all right." But of course, that's not what they care about.
And I mean, the danger level of this is, I don't know, mind-boggling to me. The danger to you, and the danger to your contact. Like, why would they want to help you? Are you paying them a lot of money? Like, okay, I'm going to help Luis out because he's going to, like, I mean, the danger for you to motivate, I know you want the story, but it's your life on the line. And also for the contact, their life is on the line.
Definitely. I mean, I don't think there will be any amount of money that will be interesting for him, since he's making tons of dollars out of drug trafficking. So no, I'm not paying my contact. I started developing this source at a distance, texting each other and trying to earn his trust, like giving him messages where, "Hey man, I just need to know about this. I'm writing a story regarding this, and I just need to make sure that I'm not writing the wrong story, that I'm not stepping on someone's toes or, saying something that it's not real." And then he started like texting back, and he learned that I was never publishing his name, never risking his identity. He learned how I was doing things, So first of all, that was like a first few contacts. And then we jumped into a phone call. Obviously had like many different phone numbers. So we started like chatting over the phone. And I was like, "Man, I'm doing this story. Do you think, I don't know, like Los Chapitos, the sons of El Chapo, are going to fight against, I don't know, Mayo Zambada?" And he will tell me, "No, man, that's totally an official rumor by Mexican government. They are not fighting amongst it." So that kind of reporting we started doing. And then I decided to go to Culiacan and send him a message. And I'm like, "Hey man, I'm going to step foot into Culiacan and I need to report a couple of stuff. It will be cool if we meet each other in person. I'm going to be staying at this hotel." I was like fully transparent.
And this is the first time you met him?
That's the first time I met him. Of course, I was nervous. I was scared for my life, of course. But I mean, at the same time, I had a lot to win. I had a good source and a solid contact in Culiacan to win and to actually report accurate stuff and not just be repeating talking points from government press releases or other journalists. So yeah.
So let's relive this trip with you. You're now you made it to Culiacan. You're going to meet your contact, and you packed not just like a sandwich and your cell phone. You have other things with you.
Yes, exactly. I do try to take care of myself, and I do. What I usually do is I take my laptop, I take my cell phone, I make a security setup, which is basically having a contact in the U.S., a close friend, relative, or journalist in the U.S., and let them know I'm traveling this route. My plane should be arriving at this time. I'm going to be staying in this hotel, and I should be getting back to you every 2 hours. Maybe when I'm going to be out to one of these laboratories or Sicario training camps, I'm not going to be able to get in touch, but I should be back in my hotel by this hour. So that's sort of like one of part of the
Like we
security.
ask our kids, when they get out of the house, tell me when you're home.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And I'm checking in like every now and then. And of course I call my contact in Sinaloa and come like fully transparent. So like, I mean, this is what I want to do. If you want to, I don't know, show me or tell me, or if it's not doable, just let me know. And that way I won't go all the way to Culiacan and just like stop my story right there,
Yeah.
I also take up a couple of stuff. Like I take this bracelet, which is it's called GTFO, which can basically break a window if you're kidnapped.
Wow.
You just do this, and it has like this little rock right here, and if you do that, boom, the window will break like a big hole in it, and then you can just break it, the whole window, with your arms or with a kick. That's one of the things I carry. Very unsuspicious. It's just like a regular bracelet. It doesn't really look like anything like that. These are also handcuffs. You just tie them up and grab them if you need to handcuff someone. And I also use them as a bracelet. It's very unsuspicious bracelet, just like that.
Okay.
And yes, and basically that's it. I mean, I do have like some razor knives in case I will need them to escape or anything. But most of the times I cannot take that on a plane. So sometimes I'll just leave that home. I also sometimes take a different watch other than my Apple Watch, just like a flashy one. Because I mean, when someone who is not after you directly, when you get caught in the middle of a criminal, and they don't realize that you're a journalist and that you might be a threat to them or whatever, but they just want money. They want to kidnap you, extort you, or something like that. They want money. So sometimes if you don't have a bunch of cash on you, because that can be tricky as well, you do have a pretty nice watch on your arm that you can exchange for your life. So it's just like, take my pretty watch. It's a good Rolex. You can have it, and just give me a couple of hours to leave. So yeah, that's basically what I pack and what I packed this last time when I was in Culiacan.
Yeah. Wow. And then you made it to a fentanyl lab.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
I've watched these blue M30s, those fake Percocet pills, popping all over in the U.S. They are growing huge in every single city in the U.S. It's like an epidemic. Other than cocaine,
We've taken care of people who died of them, and
yes,
I know friends who've died of them. It's terrible.
It's terrible, and so I wanted to understand, like, who's making these pills, what's in them, and how much do they cost to produce, how much are they selling these for, why they started doing these fentanyl pills, So that was mind blowing to me. So I asked my contacts, and I'm like, hey man, I'm looking into these blue pills. I don't know if you see them around, and if you can show me around. He's like, yeah, of course, man. You're talking with the right guy. You're talking to the right cartel. We're the Reyes, like the kings of M30s. So I was like, can I come, and can you take me to one of these labs? They were very, very jealous of showing me the machine that presses the pills. And I don't know why, because you can get that pressing machine out of Amazon, or, it's
they were proud of that one.
But yeah, they were like, we're not going to show you the machine. And I'm like, I don't get that. I guess that's the least interesting part, Yeah. But what about the whole precursors? What about the fentanyl itself? What about the acetone and all that stuff that it's in the mix?
Yeah.
They showed me everything. I arrived to Culiacan. I thought that I was gonna go out to that fentanyl lab during the next couple of days. So I I went there planning for 8 days. But that same night, my contact called me and said, like, hey man, let's go tonight. Let's just do it. So I have stuff to do the next couple of days. And I was like, wow, that was just the right way. I just got here. But yes, I mean, I'm ready as one can be to go to one of these places, So yeah, he was telling me, obviously he showed up to my hotel room and he laid out the rules. The first, it was like no cameras. So I had my proper film camera. And it was like, no cameras, man, you can only take your phone and have it on airplane mode at all times. We're gonna go to a lab. We're gonna do some crazy driving around town to lose people, because I suspect that there are some intelligence Mexican officials staying at your hotel. And I don't know if it's because of you or because of someone else, but we're gonna do some deflected driving. And I was like, by all means. I mean,
did you drive or did he drive?
I always drive. I never feel comfortable going. That's my only request to them. You know, I don't get into a car of one of you where I'm not able to drive. If that's non-negotiable, I won't go. I'll just call it off and say, like, man, if I have to jump in a car with you where you're driving, I don't feel comfortable, and my story doesn't worth that much, you know. So I'll just leave it at that. So yeah, I was driving. I had a rental, and he sent me a location. I was like, okay, I'm gonna start driving. I'll send you a location. When you're close, just give me a call and keep going. Don't stop. So I was like, okay, yes. And I give him a call. So like, I'm arriving at location. It's like, yeah, I see you. Just keep driving. I'm gonna follow you close from behind. And then he called me again and said, like, hey, you have a white car following you. I'm pretty sure that's government. And then he started like giving me directions, you know, like turn right, turn left, stop at that store, get some, I don't know, candies or whatever, a soda, and keep driving. And I kept driving, and then the white car again, and it was like, there he is again. Tried to step on the speed and make a right out. So I was like, whoa, went out, and the white car just went straight up. And it was like, okay, we got rid of him. Let's drive again. So we started driving back again into a neighborhood, and then I was nice apartment complex, you know, right in the nice area of Culiacan. And he asked me to stop. So I stopped, and he was like, all right, so this is it. This is where you're gonna go. You go first, go knock on the door on the right. They're gonna let you in, and that's it. So I went in, and I met one guy who was, he wasn't covering his face. When I said that I was gonna start recording, he asked me to cover his face and get like, he had some dark sunglasses on, so we wouldn't like recognize his face. And he had a bunch of fentanyl pills around. It was like, I don't know, it was like around 50,000 pills. And he was just packaging everything. The smell was awful. I had a proper mask, like a ventilation mask that I was made for that. But still, I get the fumes. Like every time he will burn one of these pills, you will get the fume, and you will feel the effects of the fentanyl. I don't know if I'm hypersensitive because I've never used
Did you wear? So you wore a mask, and
yes.
And the person there was wearing a mask.
Was wearing a mask. Yes,
right.
Everybody was wearing a mask, and then he started like burning one of the pills to test for quality.
And gloves or no gloves?
He was using gloves. Yes, he was using gloves. I was not, but I was not touching anything on the table. But I could feel the fumes. You know, I started like getting like lightheaded and kind of like dizzy. You know, kind of like slow. And he was like, "Are you feeling it already?" And I'm like, "Yeah, man, I'm getting worried. Should I go out and get some fresh air?" And he's like, "No, nothing's gonna happen to you. You're just gonna feel lightheaded because you're feeling the fumes." But still, I was like, "No, let me just go out and have some fresh air because I don't wanna." You know, I was kind of nervous of, is this a trap? Are they gonna have me, you know, like pass out and that's it? So I went out and I started like breathing fresh air for a couple of minutes, and then I went back in. And that was like the first time I arrived to that lab, to that place.
Yeah. And you mentioned like the cook. You met the cooks, right? Who make this stuff. And
yes.
And who teaches them how to make fentanyl?
The guy I met, a Chinese man, came down to Culiacan all the way from China to teach him how to cook fentanyl pills. Apparently fentanyl, and I thought that was a myth where you touch fentanyl or just smell a small quantity of fentanyl and then you can pass out or have an overdose. Because I watched that. I don't know if you watched that clip from I think it was a police officer in California and he gets like an overdose. So I thought that was a total myth, I was like, you cannot pass out from touching like a substance.
Yeah.
But these guys were very scared about the fentanyl. They were like scared, and it was like, so fentanyl.
The cooks were scared.
The cooks
were.
Yeah, they were like,
okay.
Man, this is dangerous stuff. You should never touch this. If I open the box, let's make sure every window and door is closed and that we don't make any wind of any kind, because we can smell that stuff and then have an overdose. And I was like, all right, how do you learn all that? And he told me that this Chinese man came all over to Culiacan for 3 months to teach them how to cook, how to handle fentanyl, how to get the precursors, and how to make a proper mix, and when you can add more or less. He told me that he was trained for, I think, 2 months. He was just only watching and taking notes. And then the last month was like, okay, you're going to cook by yourself. I'm not going to say anything. I'm just going to be here watching you. And after that, his boss, one of the Sinaloa cartel bosses, said, okay, we're going to send your stuff all the way to the US. And let's see the reply. Let's see what the customers say about your work. If they love it, you're in. If they don't, you're back to...
Who's in? The cook is in, or
the cook? Yeah.
Okay, that's their thing. So how many? So they got one Chinese guy who's sending the precursors. I assume the precursors are coming in from China, and they send a guy, say, okay, now I'm going to teach you how to assemble this, how to make it. How many cooks are being trained by the one Chinese guy?
Just one at a time. That's what I was told. Just one at a time, and then when he has like a couple of years in, he has to train another one. So after 2 years, they train another one in case he passes out, or he dies, or he gets kidnapped, or by another organization. They're very valuable to the organization, so they are very kidnappable. So another group can come and say, like, let's kidnap this guy who knows how to do fentanyl, and basically
I thought we'd have a class, like, hey, they'd have several students in the same.
Yeah, no, apparently just one by one.
One-on-one. Interesting. And didn't you say that the cook had an overdose?
Well, the helper, the new one, the trainee, this cook was training another kid.
Yeah.
And that other kid was like extremely scared about the fentanyl bag. He was like pushing away, and he had like a double mask, and so I was like, what's with you? Why are you so scared? Is it that dangerous? And he told me, I just got up out of the hospital 2 days ago. I had an overdose. My mask moved a little, and then so I inhaled some of the pure fentanyl, and I was blacked out, and I was in coma for 8 days at a hospital. Just because of that, and I'm just out. And I'm like, you're just out of the hospital for a coma, and you're back at cooking? And it's like, this is what I do, man. I mean,
it's a living.
That's a living, and they're not paid bad, I mean, for Mexico, they're being paid $4,000 a month. So for Mexico, it's not too
good.
bad. Yeah, I mean, it's not super good. They can't live, like super well. But if you didn't study anything, if you're not a professional, as a doctor or whatever, that's pretty good payment.
So that's so talk to us a little bit about the economics of things. So a cook makes $4,000 a month, and you're talking about batches of 50,000 pills at a time, and each pill, how much do the pills cost?
To produce them, they told me they spend 50 US cents for each pill to cook. And they sell that for around $4 to $5 US each. So the the profitability of each pill is huge. It's very, very big. And of course, they do have to pay the guy who transports the pills to the border, because Sinaloa is far from the border, so they have to transport that to either Tijuana, Mexicali, Ciudad Juarez, Reynosa, all these different borders, and they do have to pay that guy, but they don't pay a lot to that guy, because that guy is basically a freelance, so he has a lot of clients. He has people who say, like, I have 2 kilos of coke, and another one said, like, I have 10 kilos of weed, and another one said, like, I have 20 kilos of fentanyl pills. So he gets money from all of them, stacks them in the same car, and drives them to the border.
And you have they have a method of quality control, right? Where, like, how do they know that this is a good batch or not batch?
Yeah, that was mind blowing, and I forgot to add a detail on the video on my short clip that I had, and this is very important, and is they do have a bunch of addicts around them to try the pills, and that's not only mind blowing, that's immoral. They do have addicts and say like, okay, try this pill and let me know what you think. Some of them die, of course. Some of them overdose. Some of them say like, no, this was not strong enough. So you need to cook a new batch. So they have a bunch of addicts trying fentanyl pills for them. But at the same time,
guinea pigs. They're guinea pigs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, basically. Yeah. And then at the same time they have like a quality control for pills. They need to be of certain color for each client. They know that in Chicago they don't like greenish pills, they like deep bluish. They know that in LA they like them greenish, so they have different set of colors, a different notebook for each, and say like, okay, so for LA it's going to be 2 drops of pink and 1 drop of blue, so stuff like that.
Wow.
They do burn the pill to know that the pill slides on a foil.
What does that mean? What does that mean if it's slide?
That basically means that if they burn the pill and the pill starts sliding down, that's like a good quality pill, because it's greasy and it's sliding. If the pill gets stuck into the foil, aluminum paper, it means that's not good quality. That the whole batch needs to be redo.
That's crazy. I did meet an American patient in the hospital, and I asked him where he got his drugs, and he was very proud that he doesn't pay for drugs because he's the tester.
Yes.
So he gets he gets it for free.
That's crazy.
But you ask these people, like, you asked them about what do they think about people dying from this drug? What was their reaction?
Basically, the cook was very, they tried to feel better of what they do, so of course, what he said is like, I'm only doing what I'm requested to do. If I were doing this and had no clients, I wouldn't be doing this. Why? I will be like washing cars or working at a factory or whatever else. But there is clients and people requesting. So if I don't do it, someone else is gonna do it. Someone else is gonna get that money. So why not me? So he was like, I don't make addicts. See, that's what he says. That's what he really believes. It's like the addicts are requesting for these products, and I'm just delivering to them. And he said,
it's so funny.
Yeah.
You know where else I heard that? I heard that when we visited a marijuana dispensary, and the owners were like, "This is what people want. This is what they need." And I said, "But people are dying from it." It's like, well, that's not our fault. That's what the law. We're following the law.
Exactly like that. They are just
very different than a doctor, right? If I gave a medicine to somebody and they died or had a bad reaction, the first thing I would do is stop.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I would ask questions, right?
Definitely, because you have a full responsibility on what you're giving out to people, and so these guys don't feel any responsibility at all. They feel so they have these clients that send messages back and say like, you know what, we need stronger stuff. And then I told him, during this period of time, a lot of people died, and most of that product was traced back to your cartel. And he was like, well, yes, the thing is we're trying out. It was trial and error. We had a bad batch of too much fentanyl. A lot of people started like overdosing. So I was like, okay, so we need to take it down a notch. And I was like, don't you feel responsible for all those? And he's like, I'm not, like forcing them to take the pills. They are taking the pills already. And of course, you can't go into a proper conversation with them because they don't want to feel guilty. They start getting angry, So yeah.
I was thinking about how you're saying, okay, you used to be able to see the flashy people in the cartels with their Lamborghinis or Ferraris. Yeah. What about some Chinese guy in Sinaloa? Doesn't that stand out? Like, what are you doing here?
Yes, definitely. And I think it happens. It has to happen in Sinaloa, and especially in Culiacan, because no one can enter Sinaloa or Culiacan without permission, of the cartel. So that's a city fully in control of the cartel. So if they see a Chinese, who's gonna say what? Like they're just gonna make as if they didn't see anyone. It's like, well, that's weird. It wasn't Chinese, but who are they gonna tell? When I boarded the plane back to Mexico City from Culiacan the last day, I saw a lot of Americans dressed in camo boarding the same plane from Culiacan to Mexico City. And I couldn't resist thinking what they were doing.
Stand out.
Yeah, I mean, what were those guys doing in Culiacan? If not, maybe training some of the sicarios, They look like U.S. military or former military. A lot of them were young people, a lot of them were old people. So I was like, that was interesting to see them boarding a flight.
So you make your living off journalism, but this is very interesting work. Does U.S. law enforcement or intelligence ever come to you and ask you about what you're seeing?
Yes. I mean, it was more often some like 4 or 5 years ago. I don't know why. Maybe they just gave up. But yes, I do get across the border a lot. So one of those times when I was walking across the border, I was stopped by some of them, like some plainclothes officials, and asked me if they could talk to me. And I said yes. They took me to a different room, and they told me that they were reading what I was writing on, and that I had some interesting access to stuff that might be helpful for them. And I was like, of course. I mean, you have my handles. Follow me on Instagram. Follow me on my YouTube channel. You'll learn a lot about what I do. And they were like, so do you think we can start cooperating? And I was like, what do you mean cooperating? What does that entitle? And they said, like, well, we can basically pay you for information. But they were like very I don't know if unclear or not transparent.
Did they ask you to be a spy, Luis?
They basically asked me to share information that was going to be helpful. And I told them, like, is this going to end up in you guys arresting people, so like basically what we do is reports, and every time we get a hit, that's how they call the reports, is like a report that goes through and that our supervisor says, this is a good report, we can pay you. If it's not a good report, we can't pay you. And the other thing is, like, we are not going to go and do arrests and stuff. What we're going to do is share this information to Mexican officials. And I was like, so what do you think is going to happen to me right when you share that to Mexican officials? Yeah. He's like, no, we're going to be very careful. And I was like, I mean, the one thing is, I'm a journalist. I'm not a spy. I do my living on this. I do have family. I am taking an enormous risk already just by writing on this. I can't have a double life, I can't have like where I'm reporting to you and doing this and doing that. That's just too much pressure on my own health. Like that, and it's not. Journalists
have been murdered in Mexico.
Yes, it's been 6 weeks. It's awful. It's getting bad in Mexico, for Mexican journalists. It's already a very dangerous situation for us down here. And frustrating as well, because it's the impunity in Mexico that is killing us. That drug traffickers know, and politicians know, that nothing's going to happen if they kill a journalist, because they've tried that too many times. They've killed a bunch of journalists and nothing ever happens. Sometimes they will just arrest the guy with a gun, but they will never go to who ordered that killing. Because most of the times it's politicians, it's not even drug traffickers. It's people in power.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So, and I've heard you, so again, just praying for your safety with listening to these stories are very I've heard you say things like you need to change the name from drug trafficking organization to a criminal organization. Can you explain what you mean by that? Why do they need a name change?
If you've seen Narcos and Narcos Mexico in Netflix, that was a time where these guys or these organizations were drug trafficking organizations. All they wanted to do is just traffic some drugs, because they knew that once a load of coke make it across the border, its price goes way up than what they paid for it. It's just basic market. It's like I'm getting a chip and selling it for twice or maybe 50 times the the money I paid for that. And that's what they were doing. And they paid politicians to let them go through. They do have a lot of killings, but mostly on other drug cartels, because they wanted to own that specific part of town to get drugs across or whatever. Or someone stole some of their drugs and they had to kill them. But right now, it's not about drugs anymore. I don't think it's even. I mean, I don't think drug traffickers are even involved in the whole thing. This is a different thing. This is criminal organization. They are involved in kidnapping, extorting, monopolizing legal markets like cigarette market, the alcohol market, the lemon, avocado, some blogging, wood that goes up to the US and some other countries.
Avocados are being...
Avocados are huge for cartels. Avocados are huge. Like every Super Bowl season, you will see a bunch of killings in Michoacan. Every single year for forever, since ever. Because during Super Bowl season, the US consumes a huge quantity of avocados that skyrockets the prices in Mexico. So cartels say like, okay, it's money time. They go and extort farmers. They go and try to fight each other for controlling avocado farms to make a ton of money to pay for their guns, for more drug loads, all that stuff. So it's crazy how they are not all over the drugs right now. They are all over everything. And now politics as well. They control the politics. They control politicians all over Mexico. And they are trying to monopolize the places where they themselves put a certain president or a certain mayor or the chief of police or governor. So this is not drug trafficking anymore. This is way far from drug trafficking. This is criminal organizations properly.
What is human trafficking? Tell us about. You said
Sure.
that they're involved in that. What does that mean? What does it mean to traffic?
Well, human trafficking, it's usually two things. So most of the times people understand human trafficking as human smuggling, which is a completely different operation. Human smuggling is basically smuggling migrants from Mexico to the US. And that's a huge business for cartels right now. As the influx of migrants is growing to a number never seen before, they are monopolizing the whole business of human smuggling. Mm-hmm. And that's giving a lot of revenue for them. And human trafficking is a completely different thing. Human trafficking is more about sex, forced labor, sex slaves, and basically kidnapping people to be sold in a different country. And they do have the hands on that, although it's not as huge as they think it is because it's a more complex operation.
Is it mostly women or is it also men?
It's mostly women and mostly poor women from indigenous states around Mexico, like from southern state or Central America. They are usually more of the victims of human trafficking.
Oh, that's so. Ugh.
Yeah, it's awful.
Let's talk about methamphetamine. Methamphetamine is also, I'm in San Diego, plaguing San Diego, homeless, psychosis, mental health, really a huge toll in our society. Something else that, and a new cooking method. Did you learn about that? The P2P method of making methamphetamine instead of using Sudafed. They're getting the precursors, I think, from China and making this P2P methamphetamine. Yes.
That's the last time I was in one of those labs was like, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and it's a completely different operation. It's not an indoors operation like the last lab I was telling you about. This is an outdoors operation. It's a huge like pot where they mix a lot of stuff, a lot of acetone, and they do bring a bunch of these precursors from China or from Germany. I don't know why from Germany. I don't know if in Germany the precursors are legal as well, but they told me that the two ways they get these precursors are China and Germany, and so it's again profitability. They learn that changing the pseudoephedrine, I think it was what they used before.
Yeah, the Sudafed, yeah.
For the P2B, it's way more profitable. The margins grow by maybe more than 100%. And again, they do have this discourse of this is what the market in the U.S. is requesting right now, which I don't know if that's true, because I think it starts with them cooking different stuff and trying it out. And then when people in the U.S. of course says, "Oh, this is stronger, this is good," then for them, okay, it worked, it's cheaper and it's stronger for them, and it's better for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a huge supply side which creates the demand rather than the other way around. But
yes.
So, and you mentioned that we had the largest drug bust in history for methamphetamine was shown recently at the border. I think it was in Texas. All this confiscated methamphetamine, showing heroic seizure. And you mentioned something about that it was not that it was just a show.
Yes, and the thing is, okay, when they find these huge loads, either of cocaine or methamphetamine or whatever, I know that this for sure, because that product was coming from Culiacan, and I know because I was recently there and they were talking about a load like this. So I was like, okay, that load was fake. That was a setup, that was a setup to make authorities look good. Most of the times happen three things. One, they start finding small quantities of each drug, and then they put it together at a place and say like, wow, we found this huge amount of drugs, which it wasn't found in one place, altogether. And two, most of the times, even happens at the border with CBP officers, they don't try every single load of cocaine. They try randomly one or two or three packages. And they say like, okay, positive for cocaine, positive for cocaine. But in the mix, there's a bunch of stuff that it's not even cocaine. It's whatever else, and that's to create a distraction, to have the real, proper, bigger load get across the border. And on the other hand, also you will have these negotiations between drug organization and chief of police or politicians, where let's say I'm a chief of police that I want to become a governor in the future. So I need to start giving out results. So I make a deal with one of these guys and say like, hey man, if you start telling me where your enemy is hiding the huge stash, I'm going to be busting him, helping you, and I'm going to be, saying to the community that I'm helping out with drug busts, and that's most of these drug busts. That's the case. Either one of these three cases. The other thing they know, the Mexican officials know, and I recently spoke with the former federal police chief. He told me the thing is, when you find a huge load, the only thing you know about that is that load is only around the 10% of the whole quantity that is going around that city or on a certain port of entry. So that means if that was a 10% or less of the quantity of the total quantity of methamphetamine going through that city, that means it's flooding the border areas. It's a huge quantity going to the U.S.
Yeah, crazy. And what we capture, you're saying, is only about 10% of what's coming across the border.
Yes, right. Exactly. It's yeah. It's only
So the fentanyl, you mentioned the fentanyl is the precursors are coming for China or stolen. You mentioned also that or stolen from pharmacies. Right? And when it comes to the United States, we found that the fentanyl is comes on its own, but it's also mixed in cocaine and in methamphetamine and in these pills and in even marijuana now. Is that happening on the Mexican side or on the American side where it's getting mixed into everything?
Every time I ask about that, the people in Sinaloa have either one or two reactions. Either they get angry or they start laughing. When I showed them some news about weed being mixed with fentanyl, they started laughing. They were like, it doesn't really make sense to mix weed with fentanyl. So it's like, why will someone mix that with that? It doesn't really make sense to them. And the other thing, when I showed them like, okay, so this is an overdose from cocaine, but they found also fentanyl in it. They're like, okay, this is happening in the U.S. side of the border. This is happening from the street dealers that want to make a bigger profit of it. So they add some fentanyl to it. That's what they say. I can't be completely
Maybe
sure
they
about
have,
that.
maybe there's so much volume of fentanyl because it's so cheap to make and less of meth and cocaine and other drugs, and that's why. I don't know.
Yes, I mean that might make the most sense, like to cut the cocaine with a short quantity of fentanyl, so it's still strong, but you get more profit out of it. But at the same time, I don't know where they're getting that fentanyl from. If it's either on the black market as well, if the pure fentanyl is getting sold in the streets, or they're getting it from pharmacies, from So yeah, that's a side.
And they're very smart and creative in ways to smuggle into the United States. What are some of the most creative ways that you've come across? I saw like a methamphetamine burrito. I thought that was
Yeah, I mean, they did use burritos. They recently found a huge amount of coconuts all filled with cocaine. Yes. But I guess the most creative thing and resilient about criminal organizations was using exclusively Americans, U.S. citizens. And that happened during the pandemic. During the pandemic,
say that again. You use only
Americans, U.S. citizens specifically.
Oh, using human smugglers.
Smugglers. All of them exclusively U.S. citizens. During the pandemic, most of the borders were closed, were shut down for other than U.S. citizens or residents, permanent residents. So they said, like, okay, so we need to do something in order to keep smuggling drugs into the U.S. This means we need to recruit a bunch of U.S. citizens and permanent residents to start smuggling for us. And I went to Mexicali, with the border on Calexico, to one of these packaging places where they package, where they stash cars full of drugs. And they allowed me to interview this woman who had 5 kids. She was unemployed and going through the pandemic. She was desperate. So they were offering her $500 for each trip she'll do. Plus, she can keep the car they will give her. So she said yes, and she was like, I'm just gonna do it maybe a week. And that's it. She was in it for 6 months by then. I followed her out across the border, and she got secondary right at the border. So she got stopped and searched for drugs on her car. And we agreed to meet at a motel around in Calexico. So I stayed there for 2 hours, and she wasn't showing up. So I was like, okay, that was it for her. They caught her. She arrived later. After 2 hours, she arrived, and she was like, man, they didn't find anything.
Where was it? Where was it hidden?
It was. I didn't even see, but they usually hit it on the fuel compartment where the fuel goes.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if that was the case, but they do clean it with a bunch of like oil, like vegetable oil and all that stuff, so the dogs won't smell it. And they do wash the packages with a bunch of stuff. So she was like, this is it. I was super scared. And I think this is the last time I'm gonna do this. And I was like, what are you doing in the first place? I mean, I know you don't have money. I know you're unemployed. But at the same time, you have 5 kids. If you go to jail, who's gonna take care of your 5 kids? They're gonna go to child services or some stuff like that, And she's like, yeah, no, I mean, I really need to stop doing this. But they have an army of U.S. People, of Americans, smuggling for them.
And so this woman, is she? Let's say she got caught going to jail. Would the cartels be after her for you cost us $50,000 of our stuff or whatever?
Yeah, they instruct them, every smuggler. They instruct them that if they get caught, what they need to send immediately as they get into jail is proof of their arrest, proof of they found 20 kilos in that car, and that's why I was arrested. Otherwise, they're going to go after you and your family. So what they do, if they get to jail, if they get caught, they call a family member or their lawyer and say, like, can you get me the proof of what was hidden in my car and why I was arrested, when, so I can mail that.
So they're not so their lives is not in danger on the Mexican side.
Exactly, because that way the narcos will see and say, okay, this guy was arrested and the law was compromised. So what can we do about it? But if they don't show that, they go after them or their family.
Wow. All right, scary stuff.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
Marijuana. So in California, I'm in California. We have a lot of illegal marijuana grows in our public lands, and the cost to clean that up, I'm told, is more money than cleaning up an oil spill.
Yeah.
And these are people, growers from Mexico. That's what I hear. Is that? Can you tell me about that? Is that true? Are they sending their agricultural specialists to California?
I think yes. I mean, for what I've heard, I was sometime like 2 years ago. I was in the border of Altar, in Sonora, right across Arizona, and I met one of the families of this huge trafficker called Caro Quintero. He was a nephew for Caro Quintero, and he was like a preppy guy, well educated, with money, and he wasn't really joyful about getting over, getting to work on his family's business, which was drug trafficking. He showed me a huge warehouse with a bunch of bundles of marijuana, and I was like, "What? This is huge for a statute in Mexico." He's like, "Dude, we're not selling anything since the weed got legalized in the U.S. We're selling less and less and less." So I get warehouses packed with rotten weed, that gets here. And I'm like, "So what are you planning to do?" And he's like, "I'm a US citizen. I'm going to go to the other side and establish a proper legal crop, or sell my services as a weed grower." And that's what is happening to a bunch of them. They're selling services as agricultural weed experts for US people, maybe Mexican descent or whatever, but people in the US that were never involved before in the weed business, but that they are seeing an opportunity in the US. They're seeing like, okay, we can either set this up legally or set it up illegally. Who's going to notice? Who's going to notice the difference between a legal or an illegal crop?
Well, I think the difference is, and I'm going to have a person on my podcast just who's an expert in agriculture, but that they're using fertilizers that are illegal in the United States that's killing wildlife, endangered wildlife, and they're stealing water, when we're in a drought from
the use of water
other areas. Yeah,
exactly. That's the worst part of them. I mean, of course, a legal crop is regulated on the water they can use and the type of the crop. But an illegal crop uses a bunch of water, especially in a place like California, that is not as humid as, La Sierra de Chihuahua or the mountains in Sinaloa. It's a dry place, and it's around a city, which is getting dry, and they use a bunch of water for this. So there is a indirect consequence for this. But I guess the weed market went from being in Mexico to be in the U.S. Be illegal as it was in Mexico, but now is already established and well doing in the U.S. So that's crazy. That's something that I guess no one saw that coming.
Yeah, but I think that the illegal market is still way, way bigger than the legal market.
Definitely.
So really still destroying the lands.
Yes.
So I have an amazing coworker, Larry Irwin, who really has like a 360-degree view of drugs because he also he works as a physician assistant in my emergency department on the medical side, and then he's a full-time police officer on the other side and sees what's happening at 911 calls. And he's calling into High Truths today and asking, what can the United States do to combat the transport of drugs into the United States? What are, from what you see, what are some solutions, and how can we keep drug cartels out of the U.S. border?
I think it's far from a law enforcement perspective. I think the U.S. needs to pressure Mexico into stop impunity and corruption. I think that's the main component that keeps flowing drugs not only to the US, but also to Europe and other countries around the world, and keeps making drug cartels or criminal organizations powerful in Mexico, hurting journalists, regular citizens, and making them very, very powerful. And I mean, you can have a bunch of law enforcement, you can close the border, you can have a bigger wall, and drugs are still going to get into the US because they're getting on corruption. They're getting on corrupted officials on both sides of the border. They are working on the drugs are being transported on a proper ports of entry. You know, they don't get by land on the desert or whatever, or jumping the fence. They are being transported in regular lines of the ports of entry. The other day I was doing some math and some numbers, and the number I came up with was for every 10 person around a port of entry, one of them is carrying a load. So that's basically the statistics. And
Wait, 1 out of 10. Say that one more time.
One out of 10 is carrying a load of drugs.
Of U.S. citizens?
Of everybody entering
crossing
the
the border?
Crossing the border, yes. 1 of every 10 cars.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And that's the only way that amount of drugs have these availability all over the U.S. The U.S. has a lot of consumption inside the country. The consumption inside the U.S. it's huge.
Yeah.
So
that's the sad part of being a rich country.
Exactly, because you have the availability of money, so they can pay for drugs. And imagine all the drugs that are being stashed and they're not yet in the streets. So it's a bunch of drugs going into the U.S. And you have a rule of law, you have proper law enforcement, but Mexico don't. That means criminals are getting richer and richer by the second, and they can pay whatever amount of money a CBP officer will ask him, a border patrol officer will ask him. Maybe it's not a general thing happening around the border, and I know that for a fact. So I know a lot of CBP officers, border patrol officers, and they're doing the right thing. They have their heart in the right place. But maybe one of them is working. Maybe one of their supervisors is allowing bundles or drugs across.
Wait. You're saying our own CDPH, Border Patrol agents, have some corruption within them?
That's the only way this amount of drugs, because you're not understaffed. You have a bunch of staff, and I see every time I cross, I see them doing a proper job on me, and on everyone. I see them checking your passport. I see them looking on your car, looking for suspicious activity, looking for suspicious plate numbers, and it's like, so how can I bring a huge load of cocaine or pills or whatever if these guys are doing the right thing? And I see them every time doing the right thing, doing their job. And I know a lot of them, and they are super aware that one of those guys, and they caught a lot of people with drugs. But it's when you talk to criminals, they say like, okay, there's only 2 ways to get across. It's either paying them, having them on payroll, or extorting them. And the way they extort these officers is by girls. They say like, they love women, they love girls. So you send out a pretty girl and entice them at a bar, at a restaurant, at the same port of entry. She hands out her number. They get enrolled to something. And when they get to bed, guess what? I'm an underage. I have everything recorded, and you're going to start doing what I tell you, or I'm going to expose you. And some of them are very scared because they have family. They're like, okay, whatever. And so they start doing that before actually telling their supervisors, this is happening in my life. And that's mind-blowing. That's crazy. But that's what they do.
Wow.
And they can only do that because they get so powerful in Mexico. These criminal organizations are getting extremely powerful in Mexico.
Well, my very good friend Jonathan Morales is a Border Patrol agent. I'm proud of him. He won the highest praise in the United States as being police officer of the year, mm-hmm. because he rescued congregants in my synagogue. Uh-huh. And last year he lost his daughter to one of those blue pills.
Damn.
Even though it's his job to keep those pills out of our country, exactly. He lost his own daughter because he didn't really know.
Yeah.
what that is.
And that's the thing. It's that there's a lot of offer. I mean, I know there's a lot of demand in the US, but the offer also is huge. It's available everywhere in every single corner of the US. And that's a threat, to that country.
I think it's murdering our citizens because
Literally.
a lot of these kids, Jonathan's daughter, she was murdered. She didn't know she was
Exactly.
taking
When I was
fentanyl.
when I was a kid, I used to party in El Paso all the time, and sometimes you will get in front of pills, and you will take them without knowing what they are, and not saying like, I'm not saying every single kid they know what they're taking. When you're partying or whatever, you will just try it. And fortunately, that for me, the one time I tried that was okay. It was just ecstasy, and I learned about ecstasy and how that works, and But right now it's different drugs. I mean, imagine I have a kid. I have a 5-year-old kid, and I can think when he grows older, if we're at a place where drugs are available so easily, he's not going to ask what's in it. He's not going to have like a proper testing, like, what is this? Let me try it. Let me test it. They're just going to go for it. And they could die at the first time they try that,
You start at a young age to treat your kids' resiliency and
yeah.
not to get into that in the first place, and to protect your brain until you're 25 years old. Say that.
Yes. No, exactly.
Most of my episodes, you may be an adult, you may be going to college, you may even be married, but your brain is not done growing till you're 25 years old.
Yes, exactly.
And at that point, you're more susceptible. But so solutions. Getting back to Larry's questions, you saying investing in Mexican-U.S. relationships, China relationships.
Specifically out of law enforcement, because the other thing that's been happening is the U.S. is investing a lot of money in training elite police officers in Mexico. And what they do is cartels pay them to train them, So again, all the training that Navy SEALs, Green Berets, all these very specialized people in the U.S. are giving to Mexican officials ends up in cartels. And it's used against us, proper citizens.
Terrible.
And it's terrible.
It's our history. We've done that in Afghanistan and in Iraq.
Exactly.
And it always comes back to bite us in the butt.
Yes. And so I don't think the right approach is to spend more in law enforcement, is to spend more in policies, where the U.S. can help out Mexico in how to get rid of corruption, how to pay better police officers, how to get them in line. How is the U.S. making it so that police officers in the U.S. are well-respected citizens,
And I think it's against American politics to invest in, in elections of other countries to serve our purpose.
Yeah.
I think we've done that in the past, but in general, that's not been the way. But that's interesting. So border wall, yes or no on the wall?
No, it's not. I mean, I don't think it's useful. I've seen it enough years living at the border. It's not doing any help. It's just making more money again to criminals, to smugglers, because they say, well, guess what? The wall is bigger now. That means it's harder for us to smuggle you. So I'm gonna have to charge you twice what I was. Yeah. So that's the only use the wall is off, because drugs are going in on regular ports of entry, and people are still being smuggled by, sea over the wall, across desert areas, mountains. So yeah, it's only making criminals richer in this side of the border.
And the criminals themselves, are they users? Because usually the drug traffickers in the United States, they themselves have probably a substance use disorder and use a little for themselves and sell to others. In the big cartels, I think you mentioned the cook, they're not allowed to use any drugs, not even marijuana.
Exactly. The cooks and
them.
my contact in Sinaloa, they are not users. They are strictly against using drugs themselves. And I think it's a matter of their bosses knowing what this drug is going to do to them, So yes, the first rule is don't use it. Don't use it. So they don't use it. They do sell it. They do have it around, but they don't use any kind of, not even weed. So they're like clean people. So I guess they know firsthand what they're mixing into all that stuff,
That's great. Any final advice you have to Larry? Larry, who called in.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a matter of education, educating people properly, not by alarming them, not by doing, these scandalous headlines where stuff it's not even real, because kids know and people generally know when you're lying, but telling them this is what is in it. That's why I wanted to go all the way to Culiacan to a fentanyl lab, to tell people this is what's in it, this is how a lab looks. And I received a couple of comments on my video,
Yeah.
of people saying, I used to do a lot of these pills, but when I learned how they've been made, I stopped using them. Because, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think they're being made by like that, on a very
Interesting.
dirty and bad place, So I guess that if we get more information going on into that, kids are going to know what they're taking and why not to take it. Why it's not worth it.
So I want to say thank you to Larry. It's been an honor and pleasure to work by your side for many years. I'm proud of the unique dual role you have in our community, in the medical field as a physician assistant in a busy, stressful emergency department, and also as a law enforcement officer in another stressful, dangerous part of town. You're really amazing. And thank you, Luis Chaparro. Please stay safe. It's been a fascinating conversation to learn about your side of aspects of drugs and the labs and cartels, where you're coming from. I wish you the best of luck in telling your stories, but please be safe. And to our high truth listeners, if you want to hear and see more Luis's videos and stories, I will have his contact information on the High Truth show notes.
Dr. Lev, thank you very much for having me here. I really respect what you do as a doctor and as content maker on these topics. And I'll just want to say one last thing. I really do respect a lot of what the law enforcement in the U.S. is doing, because they're also risking their lives. It's not easy to go into a nursery room or into a patrol in any city in the U.S., especially right now.
Well said. Thank you for listening to High Truths on Drugs and Addiction, where national experts bring you facts and answer your questions. This week's episode would not be possible without the generous support from our sponsor. A sincere and warm thank you to FAF, Families Against Fentanyl. Visit familiesagainstfentanyl.org and sign the petition to declare illegal fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction. Make drug dealers think twice and 3 times before peddling killer drugs. Our producer is Dave Rivas from Davey Boy Productions. I am your host, Dr. Ronit Levy. We hope we brought your day a little bit more high truths.